Now, the loss of a loved one is difficult and emotional for anyone. So you can imagine the disgust of our next guest, who says his grieving father was harassed by aggressive debt collectors over his late wife's phone account.
Guardian journalist George Monbiot claims that Vodafone preyed on his father after the death of his wife. And despite repeated attempts to cancel his mother's account, George says they failed to help them and, worse still, appointed a debt recovery agency to chase the money. Well, George joins us now, and also joined this morning by consumer expert Helen. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for joining us. George, first of all, I'm sorry about the loss of your mother. You know, it's a really sad situation anyway, which was obviously made so much more distressing for your father, for you as a family, having to deal with this situation.
Yes, it really piles it on, unfortunately. As you know, when somebody dies, as well as the mourning, you've got a huge amount of work to do, a massive amount of what people call sadmin. And you have to cancel the accounts, you have to sort of tidy up their affairs. And most of the time that was relatively straightforward. But with Vodafone, it was actually impossible. So there were massive wait times, 45 minutes plus, whereupon you give up and you try again and eventually get through to someone. Extreme rudeness, hostility, aggression. And you think, wait a minute, it's a bereaved family you're talking to. What's going on here? Have they hired the wrong person to talk to us? And then you get put into some labyrinth you can't get out of. There's just no simple way of cancelling the account. So you try again another day, and it's a different operative with exactly the same extreme rudeness and hostility. And you think, hang on, there's a pattern here. Maybe people are being trained to respond in this way. And this constant insistence on speaking to my father. Now, we have powers of attorney. My father's very frail and confused. But they were constantly insisting that they must speak to him, and at one point started asking these impossible questions. I mean, they said, we can't cancel the account until we've spoken to him. And among the questions were, what is your wife's number? And what was the exact date of the commencement of the account? Now, none of us knew that information. The only people who did know that was Vodafone. But in my father's state of mind, they might as well have asked him, how many grains of sand are there in the Sahara? And if you don't know, we're not cancelling your account. So eventually, after this months of extreme frustration and distress caused by this total failure by Vodafone to do a very, very simple thing, which is to cancel my deceased mother's account, my sister just said, right, I'm cancelling the direct debit because, you know, you're not doing it from your end, we'll do it from our end. And she was told, well, if you do that, you'll be in breach of contract. But she did cancel it because there was obviously no other way of bringing those payments to an end. Whereupon Vodafone appointed debt collectors. They handed it over to a debt collection agency who have been repeatedly harassing my father. In fact, just yesterday, even after we thought it had all been resolved with Vodafone, yet another call from the debt collectors chasing £33, which Vodafone says that we owe them, which is money accumulated on my mother's phone bill since she died. In other words, they're still charging my mother for the phone which she clearly cannot now use. So eventually, I should have done this long before, I realise now. I just got to the end of my tether and I thought, right, we're getting nowhere with these people. They're just piling on the distress. So I went on social media, I went on Twitter, where I have 500,000 followers, and I gave an account of what had happened. And you know, I was just trying to shame Vodafone into taking action on our account. But what happened instead absolutely astonished me, because it instantly went viral, and I was flooded with hundreds of other people saying exactly the same happened to us. Me too, me too, me too. Loads and loads of people coming forward saying, yeah, this is exactly our experience. And then I thought, oh, so hang on a moment. This isn't a mistake. This is a strategy. There appears to be, as far as I can see, a corporate strategy to prey on bereaved families, to block them, to stop them from cancelling accounts, to ensure that money continues to be paid out from those accounts to Vodafone, and then to chase them with debt collectors damaging their credit ratings, incidentally, in the same way, if they cancel the direct debits to Vodafone. And so at a time of the most extreme distress and grieving, they pile it on.
George, it's so distressing here. I'm getting wound up for you listening to this, thinking about what would happen if my parents found themselves in a situation where they wanted to close this. And it can't help but sound like there is a strategy. We've got Helen Dewberry, who is a consumer expert in the studio. It certainly sounds like there's a strategy. They create a sort of a cul-de-sac of difficulty in order to close down these accounts. Is that the case?
I don't know. I don't think any of us can say for definite, but it certainly sounds like it. And certainly, Ofcom reported recently that companies need to do more for vulnerable customers, and that clearly is, a vulnerable situation. So Ofcom are saying companies need to improve, but clearly they're not. And certainly I hear stories like this all the time.
So how do you navigate a situation like that, Helen? Because, I mean, fortunately, George has a platform and was able to do it. He's a writer, he's a journalist. He and his sister were desperately trying to sort this out for their father. In the most horrific circumstances and tragic circumstances as well, how do you navigate it in a way that you don't end up with this situation?
Well, I'd always say, always put your complaint in writing, because if you phone, you're going to get that whole being sent round and round the houses. So if you put it in writing, you've got it clear right from day one what you have said, what needs to be done. And then you've also got your evidence so that you can then take that to the Ombudsman if you need to. And so the Ombudsman will then make a decision. And if they're making it difficult, because quite often the companies don't provide an email address, you can go to ceoemail.com and that will provide you with the email address for the CEO. Now, the CEO is definitely not going to respond personally, but it does go to an escalations team. So it will sit with one team and it gets it escalated, and that will usually get them focused to sort the matter out for you.
Yeah, OK, good advice. Well, we have had a statement from Vodafone. A spokesman apologised to George and his family and said there are a number of human errors following the death of his mum. They also said that they have a dedicated bereavement team. They'd be conducting a full-scale review and retraining their customer care colleagues. But, George, I mean, as we were saying, you've had so many people contacting you. We've had it in our family. My husband's nan passed away and his mum has had terrible difficulty sorting out accounts, sort of the proof that you need to send. And it's so hard for people, isn't it, at an already traumatic time to have to face going through hoops to be able to resolve situations.
Yeah, and this is why I don't accept their apology, because they're claiming these are errors. They're not errors. When my tweets went viral, they couldn't sort it out fast enough. And eventually it came down to a phone call, which just took 2 minutes and it was all done, except we're still being chased by debt collectors. But, that's because they set that hair running already. If they wanted to do this quickly and easily, they could do it quickly and easily. They clearly do not want to do that. It's made as difficult as possible. You should just be able to do it by email, or they should sign up to one of these aggregation services. Like Settled, or I think it's called, is it the Death Notification Service, which is like where they you can cancel multiple accounts at the same time, but they won't do that either, because they want to keep extracting money from people after they've died. Oh, and incidentally, this is a thing which really, really got me. Loads of people coming forward saying that the operatives they were talking to said, we can't cancel the account until we speak to the account holder. And they were saying, but the account holder's dead. No, we need to speak to the account holder. And so, which part of dead don't you understand? There's some quite funny responses. People say, well, have you got a medium? Or, oh, I'll just go and dig him up then.
Yeah. The CEO of Vodafone has said, the chief executive has said that he will meet with you to discuss this. Have you had that meeting yet, George? Are you going to meet with him?
No, I haven't yet had it. I have accepted the invitation on condition that it's part of a concrete programme of action, a timetabled programme of action to completely change this system. And I've sent them 21 action points, so things I think they need to do. It's not a perfect list yet. I'm with my followers and with the help of consumer rights campaigns, I'm improving that list. But I'm going to say this, we're going to play all this out in public. These are the things you have to do to be a responsible company, to stop piling on distress to grieving relatives, to stop preying on bereaved families. This is a list that you're going to have to tick. And I'm hoping to go in there with a couple of consumer rights groups and just continue pressing this home until Vodafone becomes a responsible company handling the very sensitive matters of closing the accounts, well, not just actually of deceased people, but people whose capacity has diminished, or indeed people who just want to close their accounts. They make it difficult for everyone.
OK.
It shouldn't be that hard,
George,
should it?
thanks very much, and good luck with that campaigning, and let's hope that more companies pay attention and change their processes to make it easier for people. That's George Monbiot there, and also thank you to Helen Dewdney as well for that consumer expertise.
Lots of you getting in touch. Helen says, George could be narrating my story with British Gas. My father passed away on March the 21st. They're now threatening debt collectors to my mum, who's been in a nursing home with dementia since 2019. Catherine says the same happened to me and my husband's Virgin Media account. He passed away and Virgin Media chased me for 12 months to get the payment for the final bill. Lots of people saying they had to pay £50. SM says, thanks for highlighting this distressing cancelling of accounts. When my father died in 2018, I reported the death to the home insurance company and was charged £50 cancellation fee. They took it to the Ombudsman and got it reversed with a small compensation payment, but still have to go through that pain
Awful.
yourself.
And also, when you're going through the grieving process, it's already a really awful time in your life, and then having to be dealing with all the paperwork and the fighting, the toing and froing, it's really tough.
To be fair, Maria says, my daughter passed away. I have nothing but praise for Vodafone dealing with the mobile contract. I was put through to the bereavement department and they were really good. Now, that's what George was saying. They do have one.
A good point.
But you've got to get there, right?
Yeah, but also I still hear stories about, dedicated bereavement teams, but they're still not trained properly, in an adequate way that you would like people to deal with you. So, and it's not just Vodafone, it's all the telecoms. They all need a kick up the backside, really, to improve their service.
All right, well, thanks to all of you for getting in touch with your